The big top story that, quite frankly, in the current position the world is in, economically, geopolitically, militarily, what we are currently facing right now is one of the most dangerous combinations of geopolitical confluence that I've ever seen. And, of course, I'm talking about Benjamin Netanyahu, who's gotten here to the United States and just addressed AIPAC, the American-Israeli lobby, one of the most powerful, the big four lobbies out there. And I've really tried to analyze what's going on here and looked at it from every single angle. First off, this is about 80% staged. They've been engaged in this fake jousting between Obama and Benjamin Netanyahu for the last 6-7 years. And at first, it's kind of like you start wrestling with your brother or wrestling with your buddies, and then all of a sudden somebody gets hurt and a fight starts. I've looked at this very carefully. It was 100% fake 5-6 years ago. Now, because Netanyahu's battling for his political life and Obama is battling for his political life with the left that is extremely anti-Israel in the mainstream. But the fact that this play fight has now turned into a real fight, and it's real, 20% of it's real, after today's speech and after tomorrow's speech at Congress, unprecedented, it might become 30-40% real. Well, 1% real with something like this is extremely dangerous. Here's the headlines. Netanyahu, Iran, nuclear deal threatens Israel's security. Big Israeli paper. Report, Channel 7 TV, Obama threatens to shoot down IAF Iran strike. You got the former head of the Mossad saying Netanyahu must go. See, there's an internal battle going on inside of Israel right now. In fact, I know you guys printed that for me. Oh, here it is. Yeah, I got it out of The Guardian. Netanyahu's address to Congress will be the most important speech of his life. Wash Post. Republicans seek coveted Benjamin Netanyahu speech tickets from boycotting Democrats. Obama Netanyahu on collision course for 6 years in the making. ABC. Former Mossad head urges Israeli voters to oust Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu warns an Iran deal could threaten Israel's existence. Relations stronger than ever with the U.S. Says that he doesn't mean disrespect to Obama. List times Israel defied America to act in self-interest. Election watchdog orders TV and radio stations to impose 5-minute delay on Netanyahu address to Congress tomorrow to stop electioneering. Kerry cautions Israel not to undercut Iran talks. Now, let's just stop right here. I was reading headlines from DrudgeReport.com. Let's just stop right there and actually break down what's going on here. If you look at Israel's perspective, they're worried about Iran getting nuclear weapons. Israel, represented by Netanyahu, who is in political trouble right now, and who a lot of people are sick of. So let's be clear about that. Netanyahu may speak for Israel at this point as their prime minister, but he may be the leader in the Knesset, but he is not the only person that speaks for people in Israel. Just like Obama is not the only person that speaks for Americans. And obviously, we all know that, but it's important to just pull that into context. Now, let me get into the meat and potatoes here. From the hardline Likudnik perspective, Israel, at least 7 other times, has attacked countries in the Middle East whenever it was being threatened or had been attacked, even when the United States was not backing it. And Israel tried to false flag the USS Liberty to blame it on Egypt. And that's since come out, and the Israeli pilots have spoken out. They were ordered to blow the ship up, and they failed. The point is, governments do that. So when Benjamin Netanyahu comes out and says that in his APEC speech just an hour ago. That is major, major saber rattling. And Saudi Arabia is saying that they will back Israel in their major papers. So they've officially said this in a strike on Iran's nuclear sites. And then if Iran responds, Saudi Arabia already has nukes, ladies and gentlemen. That came out a long time ago. Israel has 800 nukes at least. They're talking about nuke strikes with so-called tactical nukes on some of these underground bunkers. And then Russia could get involved, and that's where it leads into a World War III scenario. And we've got former CIA folks actually in the news talking about that today. So that's coming up in the next segment. So I'm laying out just different pieces of what I'm looking at. So we're not just saying I'm with Israel or I'm with Iran or I'm with Obama. Let's look at the different interests that are out there. Now, to understand what's happening between Iran and Israel and Saudi Arabia right now, let's pull back. Israel, shamefully, the United States, shamefully, Europe and NATO, shamefully, Turkey, shamefully, Saudi Arabia, shamefully, all have been involved in the dirtiest of crime. That's a fact. Just a fact. And you got to understand this point to understand the entire compendium. You get this, you get everything. What's been going on in Syria for 4.5 years, just north of Israel, in Lebanon, bordering Iraq and Jordan and Turkey, and what they're going to make Kurdistan? Syria. You control that, you control the entire region. It's a key piece. You take the Russian Mediterranean port, you get the oil and gas pipelines, you install a regime. There's been a Shiite, Iran, Wahhabist Sunni proxy war, Saudi Arabia, in Syria for 4.5 years with the United States and Israel, with Saudi Arabia ganging up on the moderate Shiite, Alawite minority that runs that country, with the Christian minority, committing war crimes and pumping in al-Qaeda out of Saudi Arabia to bring them down, committing atrocity upon atrocity. Israel has been involved in this. Netanyahu, and I'm not demonizing Netanyahu. This is a fact. He gave a speech 6 months ago. It was in a Jerusalem Post headline. Why we need al-Qaeda in Syria. And the answer is, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. No, 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 you don't use the Ring of Mordor. It only ends up corrupting you. So, there are different power structures, different special interests involved in the world. Why is the gun lobby one of the only true conservative libertarian lobbies that has any power in this country and can defeat the will of the globalists? Because people understand that they're being disarmed to be slaves. And they won't back down on it. They get politically involved, and they give money. And they give time and energy to the Second Amendment. They put bumper stickers on their cars. They teach their friends and neighbors how to shoot. So we're winning the fight for self-defense. There's the gun lobby in the U.S. There's the big banking cartel lobby. There's the big pharma lobby. So there's the gun lobby, the big banking lobby, pharma lobby, insurance lobby, defense lobby, and the Israel lobby. So you can say there's 6 big lobbies, but really there's 5, because big pharma and the whole healthcare lobby is pretty much the same group. So 5 or 6 lobbies, depending on how you break it down. The Israel lobby is one of the most powerful because it's got about, let's be conservative, 10,000 times the funding of the Scientologist, and will come after you if you mess with any Israeli interest. I'm not comparing Israel to Scientologists. That's another big lobby. It's probably 20 down, but it's tiny, but people fear it. So Israel, of those 5 lobbies, is probably the weakest lobby when it comes to money, but it's got its operatives in the other lobbies. So you could argue it's the most powerful lobby. But there's infighting between these different lobbies. There's infighting in Israel. Israel's not unified. You got a bunch of people in Israel that are sick of the Likudniks, sick of Benjamin Netanyahu. There's been all these assassinations, the rest of it. Israel has its own problems. And so you've got Netanyahu, who's set for an election coming up. He's neck and neck in the polls. He needs this to grandstand and say Israel's future's on the line. You got to commit behind me or it's all over. And he could use this big speech in Congress tomorrow to legitimize an Iranian strike by Israel and Saudi Arabia, which they've both been openly saying that they will work together on. So this may be Netanyahu selling a Iran strike. That's a whole other kettle of fish that could lead to World War III. We'll break down in a moment. And again, I'm not for it or against it. I'm being a political atheist, just giving you the pieces right now. You can make your decision. We report, you decide, to steal the Fox maxim. So Netanyahu's got selfish reasons for what he's doing. He's being attacked at home. Now enter Obama. What's Obama doing? The left, all they've got's race baiting and class warfare. They're part of the globalist operation. The Democrats totally work for the big interest, special interest, other than the Second Amendment. That's the only interest they don't control, and they hate it. That's the only thing where we put energy in, to have an interest, to have a grassroots interest, to have a special interest that represents the general public. So you've got these other lobbies fighting with each other, power grabbing. And the Arabs have probably more money than the Israel lobby at this point at some levels. And so the Saudi Arabians and others are pouring money in. They're also allied with Israel. So there's a little bit of schizophrenia here. And there's juxtaposing balancing acts going on in this whole cloak and dagger situation. So you've got some of the pieces there. Obama wanted left cover to be able to expand a fake globalist Google-run Arab Spring to take over the Middle East, North Africa, and actually put radicals in for Saudi Arabia and Israel to destabilize the entire region and keep it in the Stone Age, bring down industrialized sectors like Egypt and Libya. They've done that, but it backfired. Egypt and others withstood it. Syria withstood it. They're calling Libya a huge failure, saying al-Qaeda's murdering thousands of minds. No, that was the plan. So the military, one of the big groups, not so much the defense lobby, but the defense operatives themselves realize this big picture now, and that's why the globalists are in so much trouble. So then they had to act like they were against al-Qaeda that Saudi Arabia and others had sent into Syria. And so Obama had to come out and act like he was against them, even when he's airdropping them weapons. So here's where it gets confusing. If you're not confused yet, you've got to extrapolate all this out. Clearly, Israel and the United States and NATO were allied purely with al-Qaeda up until about 2 years ago to take down Syria, to break up Iraq and other areas. So Israel, the U.S., and others were backing al-Qaeda to engage in some of the greatest atrocities the Middle East has ever seen. When they lost because of Russian special forces, technology, and advisors, and got beaten in a bunch of battles in the last year and a half, and when they couldn't get airstrikes in Damascus and surrounding areas by the U.S. and NATO to break their back, they flipped and made a deal with Iran to double-cross the al-Qaeda people and to remove them, and then to not bring down Syria, but then to have Iran get rid of its nuclear weapons arsenal. The problem, and Iran's had nukes for at least a decade. Let me just give everybody a little news flash here. I have that from, I'm not even going to get into it, okay? High-level special forces people. They've got satellites and stuff that can see through the rock. They got bombs. Now, they can't deliver them probably, but the point is, you've got all that going on right now. You got the CIA denying it. So there's this huge balancing act going on from all these different angles and all these different sides. You've got Obama and Netanyahu insulting each other to look good with the anti-Israel crowd that makes up the body of the Democratic Party. The leadership's pro-Israel, but the body of it is anti-Semitic. I mean, if you say you disagree with the color of the sky, they call you anti-Semitic. And by anti-Semitic, I'm not saying there are things to criticize about some of the policies in Israel. It's just vitriolic, mindless, bestial. You know, you're a Jew because you don't want to blow up Israel, Alex, and Israel pays you off. You know, no proof, no evidence, no, just mindless. We're better than you. You're a Jew. We're going to kill you. So you've got that group, and Obama gets huge money from them, It's made up of Arabs, Muslims, trendies. You go to any anarchist event, it's promoted everywhere. It's sick. The left and radical Islam are allied. Netanyahu's got his right-wing base he's feeding red meat to, so they're attacking each other and fighting with each other and criticizing each other and having Kerry being overheard saying things. It's all staged. But just like you're fighting with your brother or your cousin or your buddy, sometimes it turns into a real fight when you're shadowboxing. And so now this has escalated up where Israel, still in the south, is backing some of the rebels and giving ambulance support to al-Qaeda. That's on record. That's in Israeli papers. But meanwhile, they are getting ready to hit Iran, and they're pulling back some of their support for al-Qaeda in Iraq. And so what it looks like, as best I can tell, that Free Syrian Army that's really al-Qaeda, once the U.S. started double-crossing them with Iran, Israel supported them for a while and kind of threatened the West to run in and take over part of Iraq, with Saudi Arabia giving the funding and weapons. And now that isn't going too well, so Israel's pulling back from that support while talking out of both sides of their mouth. And it's a giant disaster mess. And Iran has manipulated with Russia out on top. So they threw a big fit and went and attacked Ukraine. But now the West is losing that. And it is just a giant mess. And as best I can tell, it's now boiled down to pure politics. And historically, when politicians and different mafias cannot get out of a mess, they'll start a war. So Netanyahu is more and more maneuvering towards an Iran strike backed by Saudi Arabia without U.S. support. And he said that at AIPAC this morning. He said, you know, we'll strike countries without your authorization, without your support. Iran will attack Israel. Israel will start using nukes. Russia will probably retaliate with nukes we know they've got in Syria. And you're off to the races. So there you go. Forget whose side you're on. There is no side here. This is a giant you-know-what sandwich, and I don't want to take a bite out of it. Here's the backdrop on Israel. When the West backs everything Israel does and always covers up for things that Israel's done that's bad, in the end, it discredits any support of Israel. But you look at the opposition to Israel, it is a very unsavory group as well. And this is where you get into primitive politics. You're pretty much forced to then choose a side. Well, choosing a side will lead us to World War III. We need to transcend all this idiocy. But you've got Iran, you've got Saudi Arabia, you got Israel in the mix. And I just need to say, Israel and the United States have lost the moral high ground. But that's not saying much when you're talking about Saudi Arabia and Iran. I don't think Saudi Arabia ever had it. When our governments funded al-Qaeda to blow up churches and cut heads off and take over, and then sit around and go, oh, like 1984, we're always at war with East Asia, we're never at war with East Asia. Now, oh, we've been fighting al-Qaeda all along. No. And so this has to be addressed by all the Israel worshipers. If you support Israel, you need to support an Israel that's moral and that has the world's backing because it's moral. I mean, I know people that love Israel who are like, yeah, it's terrible what ISIS is doing, and I understand what's terrible. But the multiple political groups in Israel backed with the West in this 4.5-year program of turning the Middle East over to al-Qaeda. And the argument is, oh, that's better than turning it over to Iran. No, no, no. I'm not a Machiavellian. I don't believe the end justifies the means. And Machiavellian ideas always bring down civilizations. They work for a while. They work for a while. You can have a man dying, going into shock, and you can, with his legs cut off, you can give him adrenaline. He'll wake up for a while, but he'll end up dying just the same. And using al-Qaeda to do all this stuff, and then to also take the West freedoms, because the al-Qaeda threat is disgusting. And now it's led to a split between the United States and elements of the Israel lobby. And I have a clip of Netanyahu talking about the history of the U.S. and Israel. Here it is.
That started with the beginning. In 1948, Secretary of State George Marshall opposed David Ben-Gurion's intention to declare statehood. That's an understatement. He vehemently opposed it. But Ben-Gurion understanding what was at stake, went ahead and declared Israel's independence. In 1967, as an Arab noose was tightening around Israel's neck, the United States warned Prime Minister Levi Eshkol that if Israel acted alone, it would be alone. But Israel did acted alone to defend itself. In 1981, under the leadership of Prime Minister Menachem Begin, Israel destroyed the nuclear reactor at Osirak. The United States criticized Israel and suspended arms transfers for 3 months. And in 2002, after the worst wave of Palestinian terror attacks in Israel's history, Prime Minister Sharon launched Operation Defensive Shield. The United States demanded that Israel withdraw its troops immediately, but Sharon continued.
All right, we're going to play more of this coming up. And, you know, I'm sorry. When Israel's leadership backed al-Qaeda, Israel lost the perceived moral high ground out there. But they're calling this a big speech coming up. Netanyahu says Iran nuclear deal threatens Israel's security. Well, if Israel wants to hit Iran, that's Israel's business, in my view. And then it's going to be Iran's business to respond. We're going to get Bruce Feyn's take on this here in just a moment. But if Israel has 800 nukes, why would Iran use nukes even if they had them? And now the word is Saudi Arabia has been getting them. That even came out in the Jerusalem Post last year. So they're just proliferating. Report, Obama has threatened to shoot down IAF Iran strike. That's in the Israeli newspapers. I mean, how could Obama tell Israel what they can do in their own region? Well, they're trying to tell Russia what to do in Ukraine. The Bethlehem-based news agency, MANA, has cited a Kuwaiti newspaper report Saturday that U.S. President Barack Obama threatened an Israeli military attack against Iran's nuclear facilities in 2014 by threatening to shoot down Israeli jets before they could reach their targets in Iran. Following Obama's threat, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was reportedly forced to abort the planned Iran attack. If that's true, he's here selling that attack to Congress and to AIPAC. The bigger question is this a fake split for political red meat, because a lot of the left hates Israel, and Netanyahu's in an election? Because we know both the countries backed al-Qaeda-based groups to attack Syria, and then they formed ISIS. Now we supposedly have sided with Iran. It just looks like a giant disaster to me. He knows what he's talking about when it comes to foreign affairs as well as domestic. So I appreciate Bruce Fein joining us. Bruce, let's get into this situation with Israel first. What's your take? You heard my breakdown.
Yes, I did. I think one of the first things the audience should remember that Prime Minister Netanyahu also testified before Congress in 2003 regarding the invasion of Iraq. And at that time, he testified unequivocally that he knew Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, that he would use them. He also said that, in his view, the cure of Middle East ailments was to democratize the region, as it's become undemocratized with Arab Spring. And anybody who could think you could take political cultures that are pre-Magna Carta or pre-1215 in development and democratize them really needs their head examined. It would be like asking Netanyahu to solve the problem on the West Bank by democratizing Hamas,
Sure.
It just isn't going to happen. And, of course, we followed Netanyahu's advice and ended up spending $3 or $4 trillion to make Iran stronger, the hegemon in the region. So why are we asking advice from someone who got it so wrong the first time? Aside from the recognition, I'm not blaming Prime Minister Netanyahu. His interests are being reelected and in Israel, not the United States. So he obviously has a conflict with the U.S., so why are we paying so much attention to him?
And by the way, the Israelis are saying that and even blocking out some of his speech if it's political. And he doesn't have unified total support. I'm not attacking Netanyahu either. It's just that the right wing in this country, and we're more conservative, has this idea we do whatever Netanyahu says no matter what. Well, it's just not our fight.
No, you're right. No, and if I can divert for just a moment here, as Joke said, years ago that Netanyahu was asked whether he wanted Israel to become the 51st state of the United States. He said, "Are you kidding? And lose 100 votes in the Senate? No, you know." But we need to remember our interests are oftentimes aligned with Israel's, but not always. But our interests should trump Israel's interest. We have no interest in interfering or permitting our politics to be manipulated by Israel for their own domestic affairs. It just wins us enemies. And moreover, although I say we're often aligned with Israel, we shouldn't be subject to the baggage when Israel makes a decision we think is misconceived, and sometimes they do. After all, it was the Israelis who ultimately were the supporters of Hamas to oppose at that time Yasser Arafat.
Sure.
So they can make mistakes, and we shouldn't be tied to their mistakes. I also think it's important, as you're pointing out, to remember, deterrence. There is, I think, this suggestion that we're dealing with maniacs in Tehran who don't have a desire to survive, and that unlike the Soviet Union or North Korea or Pakistan or others, they can't be deterred, even though, as you point out, they would be incinerated if they ever used a nuclear weapon. They don't even have one, maybe capability at some time. Deterrence has worked. It worked in the Cuban Missile Crisis against a far more formidable adversary. Iran negotiated an end to the war with Iraq in 1980 to 88. When we shot down one of their passenger planes over the Persian Gulf, they got reparations. They didn't attack and declare war against the United States. And they exercise realpolitik like others, even if they're imbalanced. Even Adolf Hitler didn't use chemical weapons in World War II. They have, a desire of self-preservation. I'm certainly in favor of threatening them with total incineration if they ever used a weapon.
What about the Saudi Arabia wild card? We know Saudi Arabia is in there pushing for war with Iran more than Israel.
Yeah, and again, for number one, I think the wild card's a little less pronounced because the price of oil has plunged and we don't need so much Saudi oil. But here's another example where we're being played by other countries to do their bidding. The United States comes first. Our citizens' interests come first. We pay the taxes. We obey the laws. We fight for the country. And we cannot permit, Saudi Arabia to manipulate things. I mean, one thing I'd like Saudi Arabia to do is urge the president and the Congress to release these 28 classified documents that suggest they may have been up to their elbows in 9/11 itself. And here we have, more than 10 years after the 9/11 Commission report, we don't even know what that connection is because of the secrecy. But Saudi Arabia, other countries there, all wanting us to get involved in their affairs, we say, our country comes first.
What do you think's really at the bottom of this? Because we know the U.S. and Israel were allied trying to overthrow Syria using really nasty people out of Saudi Arabia and other areas to do it. We now call them ISIS. They were called Al-Qaeda. Now we know we've sided with Iran to try to get control of that out-of-control group. I mean, I don't even know if there is cloak and dagger here. It just looks like a bunch of political wonks that have really screwed things up.
Well, you're right, Alex. We oftentimes try to impute some kind of grand strategy or plan, but there isn't any. I mean, I've worked in government as well. It's all ad hoc based upon the next 24-hour news cycle, and it's just reacting, for the next day. But that is the problem. There isn't any ultimate strategy. There's no goal. Can you imagine a war? Take World War II. If it was defined as the goal was to degrade, the Luftwaffe. I mean, to fight the Japanese Zero aircraft. That's not a strategy. That's just, we go fight to kill. But it has no political objective. It has no definition of what victory is. And that is one of the reasons why we should be out of this. We are in a position where if we didn't, basically take a bayonet and smash a hornet's nest and create a lot of very angry hornets, we have the ability to sit and ensure we are not attacked in the United States. And these other people who are half crazy and fanatical, they'll kill themselves. The Sunnis and Shias have been shooting at each other for 1,000 years. Why should we get involved in their dispute? We don't wish misery on anybody else, but we got to be smart enough to know all we can do is create anger towards ourselves and make ourselves less safe, and that is just stupid.
Bruce, what do you expect out of Netanyahu's speech? What do you think it's really all about? Grandstanding to get reelected, or is he trying to sell an Iran strike?
He's trying, I think, to do both. I think he thinks the two converge, but we need to remember he's a politician. You know, it's by definition he's trying to promote his reelection. But I do think that also he believes that his reelection chances are bolstered the more he can suggest he wants to take out the nuclear equation in Iran, as was done years and years ago in the Osirak in Iraq. I, however, believe that his ultimate presentation will be largely a 1 or 2 day affair, and it's hyped here in the United States because it underscores the divergence between a Republican Congress and a Democratic White House. But I don't think the ramifications will endure more than 48 hours.
I personally understand that it's a big globalist political football. And at the same time, if you gave what is Israel or Palestine back to the people that are there, they'd start killing each other over it as well. I mean, this is reality, ladies and gentlemen. And so I've got my beefs with the Israeli lobby, who tends to be anti-gun, who tends to promote a lot of social engineering that's I don't like. I mean, I'll be honest. If Israel used their power to promote the Second Amendment here and didn't have different Israel lobby connections like the ADL line about me, I would be a lot more pro-Israel. But I take the high road. I mean, I look at some of the horrible groups and organizations around Israel. I'm sure not signing on with that rodeo. But the anti-Israel lobby is just unbelievably bad. And so it's a bad situation. It'd be like if I was on a used car lot and there's like 20 cars and they say, you know, why don't you like any of these cars? What are you, a racist? No, I mean, I don't like what Israel's doing. I don't like what the Arabs are doing. I don't like any of it. And I'm sick of having to hear about it constantly, quite frankly. I'm tired of it. And it's just all a big dialectic, create the crisis on both sides. This whole thing is pretty much staged between Netanyahu and Obama. They're manipulating their supporters. It's a real fight between the Netanyahu supporters on the right-wing side and Obama and his socialist. I mean, the George Soros crowd are always super rich, and they always support, go after the police, you know, overthrow Israel. It's the same. It's just that they've got their red meat issues that are red herrings. I mean, I don't like Israel trying to sink the USS Liberty. And then if you criticize it, you get called anti-Semitic. No, I'm against false flags. Our government has staged a bunch of false flags. People in our government. Bobby Kennedy. RFK, it was declassified 6-7 years ago. It was even on Frontline. Wanted to blow up the U.S. Embassy in Honduras and blame his political enemies. I think Bobby Kennedy was a pretty good guy in a lot of ways. But his brother said, no, we're not going to blow up the embassy and kill people. But that's how you start thinking up there at the top. Well, if I do this, I can blame this, and then it'll save all these lives. False flags are going on. You better believe it. But fast forwarding, when our government does a false flag or elements of it, I don't then hate America. So Israel's been involved in some nasty stuff. Do you just blame Israel whole hog? Israel's about 8 different political parties, 3 big ones. The political parties are always killing each other, just like the Arabs are always killing each other. I mean, Israel isn't one monolithic structure is what I'm saying. And I'm not even defending or apologizing for Israel. I'm just sick and tired of people that don't stand up for the Second Amendment or sovereignty or anti-GMO. All they do is run around bashing Israel all day. And then on the other end, you've got people that do nothing but support Israel all day, as if Israel is the center of the known universe. And I'm just tired of it. And I don't like the fact that they hand out M16s to Israelis to protect themselves, and then the Israel lobby gives money, you can look it up, to restrict the Second Amendment. I'm angry about that. I'm calling Israel out. I want it to stop. I have a right to defend myself, Netanyahu, just like you have a right to defend yourself. And if you think Iran's got nukes and you think you can deal with it, then do something about it. But it's all part of this globalism, too, where I don't like Obama, and I kind of like seeing him be criticized, but it is weird to have a foreign leader in the Congress criticizing your president. I mean, are you going to see Obama go over there to the Knesset and criticize Benjamin Netanyahu? It just, the whole thing stinks to high heaven. And I wish that I could be more supportive of Israel. I was a big Israel supporter growing up, big Israel supporter when I was first on air. Everybody knows it. The clips are out there because I saw the UN and the globalists and Soros-type groups always funding anti-Israel stuff. So I thought, well, if the UN's against Israel, I must be for it. But then a bunch of the Israel lobbies have ever done is try to destroy me, so I'm just kind of like, well, that's not very nice. So it's a sick situation. It's a complex situation. But I'm not going to be a hater. I'm not going to hate the Arabs. I'm not going to hate the Muslims. I'm not going to hate the Israelis. I'm not going to hate anybody. I'm just going to promote freedom, common sense, private property, and my right to defend myself. And anybody comes after those freedoms, I'm coming after you politically. And you can say I'm a racist all day long or anti-Semitic or whatever. I don't care. I want stability. I want prosperity. I want a future. I believe in humanity. Every child, whether they be Palestinian or Israeli or German or Chinese or Mexican. I want everybody to be free because that's what I want for me, and I know you reap what you sow. The whole thing's a mess. That's why we should cut all foreign aid and get out of this. And that means to Egypt, that means to Israel, that means to everybody. And then just engage in trade, the surest form of actually having lasting relationships like Switzerland and others do. It is a mess, though. Man, I hope Netanyahu doesn't attack Iran just for political points. I mean, if Netanyahu hadn't come out with that fake WMD stuff, I'd believe him a lot more. I just know this. The Pentagon says don't hit Iran. And you heard Fine earlier, who's a really smart guy, saying they don't have nukes. That's the CIA's baloney. I have talked to high-level people who I trust, and they say, look, they got them. And they've had them for a long time. There are a lot of nukes out there, folks. Saudi Arabia, I told you 6, 7 years ago they had them. And then last year, they said, we're getting nukes, and we probably already have them. Saudi Arabia. I just don't want to have a nuclear war. This is not 1980, you know, with Israel hitting Iraq's reactor. But if the Iranians get mad and blow stuff up as a response, Israel knows they'll get more support, and then the government can take more liberties here. So that's why 4 tyrants that are above our governments, the special interests that make money off war, this is a good move to start a big war with Iran. But if you go too far, we'll have a nuclear war and everybody's dead. Then that kind of screws stuff up, kind of messes up the apple cart, doesn't it? Blake in Texas, you're on the air. Go ahead.
You know, the situation I think we have is that Israel is not Israel. I mean, yeah, the Bible says to support Israel, but not under any circumstances, and certainly not when Israel has been hijacked just like America has. I think one message we need to get out to Christians is that, like, look at the Health Basket Committee. That's Israel's version of the death panels that Obamacare has, where they determine what medical procedures are paid for by the Israeli government. The Health Basket Committee in Israel recently voted this year to give free abortions funded by the Israeli government to women between the ages of 20 and 33. And I think, more Christians really need to know about that. We would start to change some of our foreign policy ideas and our just blind support of Israel. You have to support Israel. Mean that they've kind of put out there in the Christian community if we got that out there.
Let's talk to Frank in New York. Frank, you're on the air on the subject of Israel, the speech. What's behind this? Because it's becoming a discussion. You can say what you want to say about Israel. I'm asking, why is he coming to give this speech? Is he really about to hit Iran? What do you think is going to happen about that? I mean, what's the whole point of this? And is Israel against al-Qaeda now or for it? Because we know our government helped put them in there, but now says they're bombing them. Is it a real alliance with Iran we've got right now? What do you think's going on, Frank?
I think that Netanyahu needs to come to New York. And speaking as a New Yorker, growing up as a Christian as yourself, you got to respect Israel. We're all Judeo-Christians in that regard, and some people just don't understand that. They just don't get it. You look at Israel, just think of the logic behind this. They are a small country, and they are surrounded by everybody that hates them. So you look at Bibi. He's going to come to New York. He's going to go. He's going to come to New York. He's going to say what he's going to say in front of the UN, like he has in the past. He's going to go and he's going to go up in front of Congress. And the kabuki theater that you were talking about between the Democrats and the Republicans. What do the Democrats have to hide? You get Pelosi getting up there. She doesn't want Bibi to speak. Why? The Democrats don't want Bibi to speak because Obama isn't doing a damn thing and picking a side and standing up for Israel. He's not even calling the Islamic terrorists Islamic. So when you look at what side are you on as an American? Is your blood red like the rest of us? Well, yeah, I don't get it. So Bibi, yes, he has a right to get there. He has a right to stand up and he has to say, look, this is what's going on. With your permission or without your permission, Israel as a sovereign nation has to stand up for itself. And if we've got to fire one off at Iran, so be it.
Well, I've already said Israel's a sovereign nation, and that's what Rand Paul and everybody have said. If they want to attack Iran, that's their issue. My question is, why is Benjamin Netanyahu doing this now? Is it political, or do they really think Iran's getting ready to use a nuke? Because that'll make Iran look like victims if Israel strikes Iran.
I don't think that's how it's going to happen. There, like you said, there's going to be a flag. There's going to be something that's going to happen. Like you said, Iran has nukes. If Iran's had them for a long time, and I'm a firm believer in that, because nobody was scared of our guys being over there when we were in Iraq with our full forces than I was thinking, oh, crap. What would happen if Iran decided to unload on our boys while we're in Iraq?
Well, no, that was the word from the people over in Iraq, was that Iran had nukes up on the border. And, I mean, we know Saudi Arabia's got them now. They're proliferating everywhere. But, I mean, look at the lesson of North Korea. Nobody will attack them now, even though they really deserve it with all the provocations they do, because they've got nukes. I think that's the lesson Iran's going with. Let me ask you this. What do you think's going on behind the scenes? Because you've got Israel trying to knock Iran out by backing bad groups in Syria. I think that's very bad. But all these other governments did it, too. So Israel kind of went along with that. Saudi Arabia is in the middle of it. And then now, I mean, who's who? You can't even tell what's going on.
There's a lot of confusion there. And and listen, if you believe in the end times, obviously you're going to say there's going to be a lot of confusion, and people are going to wonder what to believe.
Wars and rumors of wars.
Exactly. This is what I believe. I believe that Israel has some hard information. And I think that he's coming here to say, hey, we stand with you. You're supposed to stand. Well, they're our best friend over there. They're the smallest, but they're our best friend over there. If they've got to take their gloves off, so be it. Although I've heard some say that, you know, Netanyahu doesn't have the stones to do that, and that's why he has a lot of opposition right now. But I think the timing is right. I think the timing is right.
Well, that's true. Netanyahu is getting opposition from groups that think he should have already hit Iran.
There you go. And coming here is the right time. And it's the right time because he needs to stand up. And this is why I'm glad the Republicans have stood with him and say, hey, we unconventionally, we're bringing you here to stand up and speak your mind because you have to. Because what's going to go on, besides our idiot Congress that can't get out of their own way, the world is going to be going on around us.
Sure. What about this problem? There's some bullying going on by total pro-Israel groups on the internet. If you don't agree with everything Israel's doing, that then backfires and gives support to the super anti-Israel groups that run around bullying even worse. I think anti-Israel sentiment is growing. Do you agree with that?
I've seen it a lot, and I'm a New Yorker. So
sure. So what do you think's behind that? I mean, Israel's not the center of the world. Why are people so obsessed with it? I think it becomes just a political diversion. I mean, here's an example. Radical Islamists have killed about 300,000 people in Libya and Syria in the last couple of years. No one talks about them. But when Israel kills like 20 people in a bombing raid, it's like the end of the world. All I'm saying is it becomes a distraction. Everybody knows what Israel does. No one else is guilty of anything. That's all I'm pointing out. I appreciate your call. And Benjamin Netanyahu has just basically completed a lengthy speech before the Congress. We're going to be breaking down some of the powerful things that he basically said, because regardless of which side of this debate you're on, there were some major statements. The days when the Jewish people remain passive in the face of genocidal aggression are over. Broadcast networks refuse to carry it. Enraged Pelosi freaks out on the floor. We've got video of all of this we're going to be queuing up. I mean, I really am in a paradox here because I have a lot of problems with some of the things Israel does. But at the same time, I'm not an enemy of Israel. And I know Israel's a diverse country that has been attacked at least 7 times by major armies and by itself defeated them. But then I also understand a lot of the Israel lobby is over here lobbying to secure a police state in the U.S., to secure their economic foothold, and to secure the U.S. as a backstop for Israel. So I have a lot of resentment over the Israel lobby. But my concern is no one looks at the defense lobby. No one looks at the big banking lobby. No one looks at the globalist, giant Latin American lobby to open up the borders and attach to the welfare. No one looks at the different cartels that are out there operating. People only look at Israel and obsess on Israel all day. And it's just not reasonable. I really try to come to the truth with what's going on in the world. And when they've had British prime ministers address Congress just a few years ago, and when they've, going back to Winston Churchill, and when they've had other Israeli prime ministers address Congress, or French presidents address Congress, it's almost always carried by television. And so Obama said he wasn't going to watch it. Pelosi freaked out and tried to keep him from speaking. And I understand at a certain level, this is about political grandstanding. For Netanyahu, who's facing re-election, I'm just being cold-blooded here and laying out the facts, and by the Democrats and liberals worldwide with the socialists that are anti-Israel to the core. But then there's the paradox of the Democratic leadership getting massive money from different arms of the Israel lobby. And so the whole thing's very incestuous, very hard to figure out. But at the bottom of the barrel, and at the bottom of the whole situation, if you go to a leftist event, they are promoting Karl Marx, they are promoting the end of the family, they are promoting world government, they are promoting violent revolution, they are promoting attack the police, and they are promoting Israel is the source of all evil and handing out and selling anti-Semitic pamphlets. Then the very same group will run around claiming brown bags are racist and having a fiesta party at your fraternity is racist. No, people like to wear sombreros and get drunk and have a food truck come with enchiladas. The Mexican fraternities have those too. The Hispanic fraternities. It's the very same group in the left will hype racism that is non-existent or exaggerate stuff that's there in vestigial to create infighting and balkanization while obsessing 24/7 on Jews. And it's acceptable in leftist ideology to kind of go along with the idea that there is a Jewish conspiracy of colonialism. That's the spin. The Klan says it's a Jewish conspiracy of banking. And then the left says, no, it's a Jewish conspiracy of basically fascist capitalism. And then when you look at it, you know, most legends like this have some kernel of truth. There are a bunch of big financiers and people like the Rothschilds that are Jewish. There are a bunch of Fed chairmen and people of the past that have been Jewish. And certainly that's something that a lot of Jews work to be in the top of finance because it's a very prestigious position. Just like you go in to find the top heart surgeon and maybe out of 10 of them in your city, you know, half of them are Jewish. So, I mean, nobody can deny the fact that Jews are, on average, overachievers, high educations. All I know is this statement that Jews are evil inherently when Jews are such a diverse group of people and constantly fighting with each other like every other group and runs the gamut from right-wing to communist to libertarian, like Aaron Russo, or Matt Drudge or so many others. I'm just sick of the stereotyping. And then the globalist above that, the very same globalists that use socialism as their control system, they are using Jews as, again, the bygone boogeyman to basically scapegoat the whole debate and just say, well, if it wasn't for Jews, there wouldn't be any problems in this world. Really, Mao Zedong killed 80-something million people, if you believe the Chinese numbers. CIA says 65, 64, 66 million. There weren't any Jews involved in that last time I checked. And I've just seen losers throughout my life who will blame a racial or religious group for all of their problems because they themselves don't want to get up and work hard and take action and work with other people and have a good attitude. That's what it comes down to. And this comes from somebody who's been savaged by the leftist arm of the Jewish lobby, not so much the Israel lobby, because, again, there's subgroups within all these groups. It's too simple just to use one name. They've lied about me. They've come after me. They've demonized me. They've said I'm anti-Semitic. They've said I'm racist. They've said I want to get cops killed. I mean, George Soros is a Jew, and he's a Nazi collaborator who helped round up and ferret out and rob Jews. He admits it. He's proud of it. He said he's not ashamed of it. He, quote, survived. The guy runs organizations dedicated to shutting down talk radio, internet freedom, and this show. He gave $196 million with the U.S. government matching him and the Ford Foundation. The Ford Foundation is basically governmental. That came out in Congress in the 70s and the church committees. Anthony Sutton got the documents. So the globalists and the government want to destroy me. So if being anti-Semitic means I'm against a Nazi collaborator Jew who's anti-free speech and anti-America, then I'm anti-Semitic. You better believe it. Just like both my grandfathers in World War II must have been anti-Semitic, both almost dying in the Army Air Corps. I'm sick of it, and I'm tired of it. I don't like a bunch of the stuff Israel's doing. Israel's corrupt like any other country. Let's get that straight and stop acting like it's on a pedestal and can do no wrong. We should criticize Israel when Israel does evil, corrupt stuff, like helping fund al-Qaeda to take down Libya and take down Syria, and that is immoral and wrong. But you can't just then obsess over Israel involved. You got to then say Turkey, Saudi Arabia, the U.S., France, NATO, British intelligence, up to their eyeballs in it. And that's my point, is that you cannot just sit there and point at one group and say they're the problem. It's more complex than that. The Rothschilds are on record, at least one of the 5 arms of the family, financing Hitler. You can look that up. But then some Rothschilds didn't get out of France and were killed by the Nazis. There's been books written on it. A lot of rich Jews ran operations with the Nazis, fencing Jews out of Europe, making them pay them money or only going to Israel. That's why people like Dr. Pachenik, who's Jewish, is so angry at the Jewish lobby, because he knows a lot of them are the children of rich Jews who made their fortunes sucking off Jews like Madeleine Albright. Are they trying to give the U.S. cover politically when Israel strikes Iran? Is this all just theater? The smart money is on that. But that's at the top of the pyramid. Below that, there is real hatred for Israel. And this is the experience I've had. I know Israel's diverse, different political parties, different ideas. I have a love-hate relationship with some of the people that are in Israel, some of the things that have been done to me for no reason. There's a lot of bullying because Israel feels like Israel's right, so you better get 100% behind Israel or you're the enemy. That's wrong. And that's why Israel's lost a lot of support in the world. That said, Israel is not the end-all, be-all, only thing on the planet. And I don't mean by the Israelis having that view of themselves. Everybody thinks they're the center of the universe wherever they live at. That's what Texans think. That's what Americans think. That's what Germans think. It's what Chinese think. It's what Mexicans think. That's just normal. I'm talking about people outside of Israel and the Arabs. And all these Arab countries won't let the Palestinians in, won't give them aid. The Palestinians constantly try to overthrow whatever country they're in. I'm not demonizing the Palestinians. I'm just saying they're used as a political football to manipulate everyone, and Israel is held to a higher standard. And it is a religion to hate Israel. So I've got a lot of problems with Israel. Some of the people in Israel, some of the political parties, some of the groups. But at the same time, it's a paradox because I've never experienced more vitriolic hatred as I have from the anti-Israel crowd. They will make stuff up. They will exaggerate. They will lie. Everyone is a Jew. I don't care if your last name's Jones, Richardson, Green, Johnson, Sanchez, Chin. Everyone is a Jew. The Jews are all powerful. They're running everything. I never had success. I wasn't a good talk radio host. I never borrowed a dime, but they claim I'm financed by secret Jewish cabals. It's very frustrating to be included on all the Nazi websites out there and white supremacist websites, photoshopped in at Jewish events, literally, fake videos, you name it. that I'm some Israeli agent. Never been to Israel. I do want to travel there. It's amazing, I'm told, to see all that history. I want to go to Syria. That's got even more ruins and Roman stuff. So I'm just sick of all the ignorance, basically. And I'm tired of sitting here watching the anti-Israel crowd degenerate by the minute, and then Israel feeling like it's totally encircled, getting more and more out of control, and all these nuclear weapons. This is a dangerous situation. I want prosperity. And when you really study politics and how the world works, you find out Israel has been as bad as the U.S. or Germany or England, 3 of the worst, 4 of the worst, I guess, at secret testing. And by the way, Israel didn't get caught doing testing on Arabs. They got caught testing on Jews. Sephardic Jews, which genetically are true, undisputed Jews. They are a proto-genetic group, pre-Arab, before African invasions of much of the Middle East. Because that's what an Arab is part Anglo, part Asian, and part African. That's just a fact. That's what Arabs are, is a hybrid. And if you look at Sephardic Jews, they have a genetic template that predates from bones they've dug up to about 6,000 to 7,000 years ago in that region of groups pretty much out of Europe. What is Europe today? So you have this whole argument about Ashkenazi Jews and the anthropology, and they're not really Jews because they're from what's Georgia today or north of Georgia. It's Europeans, ladies and gentlemen. And then you've got later permutations of Jews in Babylonian captivity, in Egyptian captivity, and other captivities. And so you do have an Arab line of genetics in the Jews. But that's who they are. So when you get into this more ancient text claiming there's these lost tribes in Europe, that's because that's what's so ridiculous about all this, is that Jews, original Jews, are just Europeans in the Middle East. I don't see this as Israel good, everybody else bad, or Israel bad, everybody else good. I see this as what's really going on geopolitically right now. And what does all this stand for? Well, if Israel's really getting ready to hit Iran, Iran is probably going to respond with asymmetrical warfare. They'll call it terrorism in the news. That will then be used to take my freedoms. It will hurt the economy, and it could cause a nuclear war. But then I also get Israel's perspective when Iran constantly shoots their mouths off. There's always apologists out there saying, oh, they didn't really say that. No, Iran, the government of Iran, really does say stuff like, we're going to nuke you, we're going to blow you up, we're going to push you into the sea, the Zionist regime. Well, the Zionist regime is the millions of Jews that live there. And so here's the issue for all the anti-Semites and all the people that think if they slip on a banana peel, a Jew did it. Do you understand Israel probably has around 800 nuclear weapons, the most high-tech type? They've got German submarines to launch the cruise missiles. They've got medium-range ballistic missiles. They've got tactical weapons, and they've got spies all over the place in the Middle East and in Europe and you name it. I mean, it's like a Mexican standoff. Everybody's pointing guns at each other. Let's just not pull the trigger. Let's all just sit down and order some food and kick back and order a glass of wine and not kill each other like Ron Paul says. So he's demonized. And you got a lot of factions. The military-industrial complex want more war. You got a lot of crazies in the Middle East want more war. You got Israel involved with the West, all guilty, like our military said 2 years ago, of arming al-Qaeda to attack Syria. A war crime, killing Christians. I'm very angry with Israel. I'm very angry with our own government. I'm very angry with Turkey. But see, I'm not especially angry with Israel because I'm not a mindless hater. I hate the criminals that globally came up with the decisions at the Bilderberg Group, Club of Rome, globalist level, and then everybody from Saudi Arabia to Israel to Turkey to France to the United States got in line to engage in war crimes all over the Middle East using proxy armies out of Saudi Arabia. Shame on Israel. Shame on Benjamin Netanyahu. And shame on everybody out there that purely worships him as a messianic leader and thinks, whatever, Alex, you better get behind Israel. I'm not against Israel. But doing things like this, funding al-Qaeda in the Middle East, is evil. and then sitting around saying we've got to attack Iran. They're funding al-Qaeda because al-Qaeda's enemies with Iran. People say, well, Alex, that's a Machiavellian move. That's how you win. No, that's how you lose the moral high ground. But I'll say this, shame on the U.S. government. Shame on France. Shame on NATO. Oh, no, 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 don't do that. Only see, here he is covering up for Israel. That's the mental illness of just, you know what, the anti-Semites worship Jews. I think that's what it comes down to, is that I don't dislike the NFL, but I'm sick of that's all you hear about for 4 or 5 months out of the year. And most men don't have a life. They just obsess on the NFL all day and play fantasy football. It's mentally ill. And the same thing, I don't hate Israel, but man, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of hearing about it. I'm sick of all the people on both sides, all vitriolically, you know, feeling like they're on the right side when it's all a big manipulation. That's what it comes down to. And you got Saudi Arabia financing anti-free speech initiatives in the U.S. You got Israel financing anti-free speech initiatives. You got George Soros doing it. You got left-wing, right-wing. You got every special interest group out there trying to shut down free speech and trying to take our guns so America, the big empire, can be their toy to go out and be a bully and take over the world for whoever, fill in the blank. And here's the deal. I'm sick of paying for it, like Rand Paul says. I don't want to give aid to China. We give billions to them. I don't want to give aid to Israel. I don't want to give aid to Egypt. I don't want to give aid to anybody, not Mexico, no one. I'm sick of it. I don't want to pay for Chinese and Mexican and German women to come here and have their babies paid for and be put on welfare and see it advertised on CNN how great it is to do it. Yeah, I don't like illegals getting free in-state tuition and free scholarships, and then I got to pay for it. Yeah, you're right. Not because I hate Latin Americans. If I came down there and got everything free from them, they'd really be upset with me. I'm sick of unfairness. I'm sick of garbage. And I'm sick of people who are ignorant. And the only reason the globalists can get away with this is because the public is ignorant. But look at these type of clips. I want to play this clip. White House spokesman Josh Earnest says ammo ban proposal is common sense. There's another clip, a little jewel from him this morning. Obama won't watch Netanyahu's speech to Congress. And I'm not really gone over his speech yet because it's more of the same. It's a repeat of what he said to AIPAC. Days when Jewish people remain passive in the face of genocidal aggression are over. He says the talks going on paved the way to Iran to get the bomb. Iran's, from what I've been told, I mean, look, Pakistan's got it, got about 100. India's got a couple hundred. China's got a couple thousand. South Africa had nukes, for heaven's sakes, back in the 80s. Saudi Arabia it basically brags they've got nukes now, kind of like Israel does. We're not going to say we have nukes, but look out. I mean, do you really believe the Saudis don't have nukes? They bragged last year they had them, and I told you years before they did, because I have high-level sources. High level, everybody knows it. So from people I trust in special operations and other areas that they've seen the scans. They've seen the scans from satellite that picks up the trace imminences, the trace radiation of fissile material configured that matches the signature of basically atomic bombs. The difference is what Iran has is tinker toys compared to what Israel has. And do you really think the mullahs that were doing backroom deals with Ronald Reagan to hold the hostages till they did arms transfers in Iran-Contra? I mean, the mullahs were put in by the CIA in '79, and this has all been declassified, in a double cross of the Shah, who wasn't playing ball with the globalists, and they gave him a weak, version of cancer. You know, one of those sped up versions that kills you in a week, one of those overnight cancers. See, I happen to really know the real history of all this, which you could find out, too, if you wanted to. I'm talking to new listeners out there. I mean, Iran, I'm not saying the globalists run Iran either. It's just that it's all a divide and conquer strategy. Let's go to your phone calls. Jim in West Virginia, you're on the air. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, hi, Alex. I watched the Excellency being introduced To me, it just seemed like a total dictatorship trying to preach to the U.S. Congress, and it really upsets me. I think if it was in vice versa, that wouldn't happen. To me, it is just, a scam, but he never did mention what is the good deal. What is he so upset about? What seems to be aggravating him? It was all poor Israel, Israel history, background, and the things we know. We know the Holocaust. Every year we're constantly reminded of it. We never will be allowed to forget it. But what is the deal that he was talking about? Why is he so upset?
Well, the deal is to let Iran have supposedly peaceful reactors that get inspected and not be able to build up enough reactors to actually produce a bomb for 10 years. And Iran's already said that it's not acceptable. And so I think Israel's issue is they're not going to let Iran become a nuclear power or Iraq, and that they will attack like they did Iraq in 1980 or 1981. I forget which year it was. And that they have a right to self-determination to do it. And I think the issue is that Israel is kind of like the 51st state, but it's also, people don't like the fact that Israel has diplomatic immunity of a type where Jews can commit crimes here in the U.S., then run back to Israel, and then Israel will protect them. There's a lot of things about Israel that upset me, that I criticize, that are unfair, and that's why we talk about it. The whole right of return thing. Pick a side, decide. You know, it's like Rahm Emanuel didn't fight in the U.S. Air Force. He was an officer in the Israeli Air Force. And so this is the thing that sticks in people's craw. And I fully understand it. I'm just saying there are a lot of other issues. I mean, basically, the Saudi Arabians have diplomatic immunity. The United Nations has diplomatic immunity. They're now giving the big carbon tax banks diplomatic immunity. So this is what globalism is a new class, where if you're a UN bureaucrat or you're a mercenary or you're an Israeli or you work for the Vatican or you work for the UN or any of the NGOs that are part of it, you're now literally above the law. I mean, Houston police and New York police have caught UN diplomats with slaves chained up. They've caught them with trucks full of cocaine. They cannot stop them or arrest them. So, yeah, I don't like Israel basically having diplomatic immunity. But I don't like the other couple dozen groups either. That's what I'm saying. Israel's going with a pattern that's been done before by other groups, and it's a very successful pattern. It is exploitive of many people in the Middle East. That's well known. It's exploitive of poor Jews coming out of Europe coming into Israel. I mean, I remember Israel got caught selling organs of political dissidents and denied it and called doctors that exposed it in Europe anti-Semites, and it came out it was true. Talk about evil. But here's the deal. Our military got caught with private contractors taking organs in Iraq. It turns out Saudi Arabia is selling them. So is China. Humans act the same. Our problem is evil people and bureaucracies. And our problem is when a group does something evil, that group tends to cover it up to protect the group, when all that does is discredit the group. I mean, like police departments that cover up corruption end up collapsing from corruption long term. It feels good for a while, but it destroys them. Same thing with Israel. When Israel says we're under attack so we can do whatever we want, Israel becomes as bad as any other group they claim they're fighting.
I have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you the Prime Minister of Israel, His Excellency Benjamin Netanyahu.
Within a 40-second standing ovation, that is disgusting to use the word excellency. That is UN speak when they introduce kings. And Israel is usually actually low-key about titles and uniforms. So that is not an Israeli affectation. Pretty soon we're going to start calling the Bushes and the Clintons, if they get elected to another term, Your Excellency. We've got a couple other clips here that we'll play when we start the next hour with Netanyahu explaining why he's against the Iran deal. And I got to say, I don't get his point that a nuclear attack on Israel is imminent when he's got 800 nuclear weapons and high-tech delivery systems. It's very simple. Netanyahu, in the clip we're going to play, gets into the fact that, well, inspectors don't stop the work. Inspectors just report back. Well, if you got cameras and inspectors, and then Iran can be self-sufficient because they can't even refine enough oil to supply their country. Refineries are very expensive and very complex. If they can't have nuclear power, they can't become self-sufficient. And so it's wrong to say to Iran, you can't have reactors, but everybody else can, and Israel can. I get the point that Iran has a lot of really strong rhetoric, and that's wrong. Netanyahu goes on, we're going to play the clip, to say that just because Iran is fighting ISIS doesn't mean they're good. Well, just because Israel and the U.S. funded al-Qaeda to attack a bunch of innocent countries doesn't mean al-Qaeda's good. Yeah, Benjamin, BB, I get it. And I think Israel's a little jealous that the U.S. military is working with Iran to clean out some of the ISIS groups. And it's all a very sick situation. And our military doesn't like it. But I just don't know what we're supposed to do. You know, let Israel attack? Well, that's their prerogative. But what happens then when it drags Russia into it? And there are a lot of Christians, and I'm a Christian myself, but there's these interpretations of cheerleading for the end of the world and getting all excited that, oh, Israel's going to go into Syria and go into Iran. It's going to start a nuclear war, and then Jesus is going to come back. You know, so many people in Nazi Germany, Christians that were rounded up and put in forced labor camps, they thought it was the end of the world and Hitler was the Antichrist. I guess the Bible says there are many Antichrists. I forget which passage that is, but regardless, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want a nuclear war. What do you make of Bibi's speech to Congress? What do you make of this Western alliance with al-Qaeda calling itself ISIS to bring down Assad, now blowing back so we ally with Iran, and Israel saying they may, you know, basically go in and blow up those reactors, and then Russia, and I mean, everything seems to be going into high gear. What's going on, Lord Monckton, in your view?
As far as Bibi Netanyahu is concerned, whom I know, because I met him in Israel many years ago when I went there as a guest of the government, what he is really saying in that speech is a cry for help. He's saying, look, this is going to hell in a handcart because effectively the West has found itself taking sides over and over again with one Muslim faction against another. And then in no time at all, it finds itself fighting on the opposite side. And all the time it is feeding Western weapons in to groups which eventually become terrorist groups fighting against the West. And it's time that this nonsense stopped. Now, of course, he's also very worried indeed about the various nuclear researches going on in Iran, which are clearly not intended so much for civilian use as for weaponizing the plutonium to make bombs with. And he is not going to allow that to happen. And he's made that very plain. After all, it was Israel who previously knocked out the Osirak reactor in Iraq when it too was working towards weaponizing nuclear material. So he is saying, if you won't do your job, because Obama effectively has abdicated in that region, he is too close to the Muslim side of things to be trustworthy as far as Bibi Netanyahu is concerned. So Netanyahu is saying, I'm going to have to act unilaterally unless you decide that you're going to sharpen up your act and find a more solid, coherent policy for. I mean, this is a very important speech. It was extremely well received in Congress. Many, many standing ovations, a lot of excitement about it. And I think this is a very important and very significant moment because Congress has decided to act unilaterally here in a way it hadn't found the courage to do so far. It invited Bibi Netanyahu when Obama didn't. Obama didn't ask him to come, but Congress asked him to come because they are concerned that he simply doesn't have a handle on the Middle East situation, which of course stems originally from the situation of Palestine. It's really Britain's fault originally because it was we who decided when we had the mandate to control that territory, eventually to give it to Israel when there were still 1 million Palestinians living in it. And that has led to conflict ever since. Now, it's very clear what's got to happen. There needs to be a generous financial settlement to those who can demonstrate that they are legitimate descendants of the original Palestinians who were dispossessed by the creation of the State of Israel. That would leave Israel in place, but the Palestinians properly compensated, but they would have to accept as the price of that compensation that they acknowledge Israel's continuing right to exist and will no longer seek to do it down. Now, that's the kind of policy that I think we're going to need to see. And it's actually Western countries that are going to have to pay for that, because it isn't Israel's fault that Israel is there. It's our fault that Israel is there. And so we should compensate the Palestinians for what they have had to endure, the taking away of their territory to create Israel. This is a problem for Palestine. We have to understand that. But at the same time, Israel, after what was done to it before the Second World War by Hitler, Israel also has its right to exist as a nation. And that way you can get both nations coexisting, I hope, in harmony. Something like that has got to be tried, because otherwise the conflict between the West and the Islamic world, which has largely stemmed out of the Palestinian conflict, is not going to go away, and it is, I'm afraid, going to get worse. And I'm very sorry about that, because my late father spoke Arabic, looked quite Arabic in some ways, knew many of the leading figures in the Arab world, and was very fond of it. And so am I. And it's a great sadness to see this really unnecessary disturbance of the former harmony there, and the savage treatment, in particular, of the Christians in Syria at the moment and other places in the region, where hundreds of thousands have been dispossessed or killed, and virtually nothing said in the fashionable left-wing press. Well, that's why Bibi Netanyahu is being received so well in Congress, because he is speaking to these issues which the present administration in the United States has nothing to say about.
In closing on the subject, why won't the feminists that say a man wearing pants hurts women, or that all sex between a man and a woman is rape, literally, why aren't they upset when radical Islamists sexually mutilate women or cut their heads off or kill Christians or put little girls into sex slavery? Why would the left, is radical Islam so sexy and chic? If you go to a leftist meeting, there are folks there just fawning after it. It's so sexy to be in a jihad slave pit.
This has always been the way that the media and the left are by instinct not democratic but totalitarian. And totalitarians will always tend to stand together and think as one. And of course, there's the additional factor that Obama has been letting very large numbers of Muslims into the United States. And this is because the first few generations of immigrants from wherever they come tend to vote left. And so the left always have policies which seem terribly tough against immigration, but in fact you always get very, very large numbers of people coming in, and in particular at the moment from the Muslim world into the United States, changing forever, as they hope, the terms of trade in voting to make sure that we never really ever get a Republican government again. That's the aim of it. It's the constant movement leftward. And that's why the left makes common cause with the terrorists and the extremists of Islam, rather than doing what the center-right does, which is saying actually that sort of conduct is unacceptable.
Alex, go ahead.
Good afternoon. All right, small thing I want to tell you, Alex. I'm former KGB server many years ago, but from 1949, KGB have plans to destroy Israel. And then they sent lots of weapons, lots of help, instructors to Muslim world, including Iran, Iraq, all other countries. So in the plans from 49, they still planned to destroy Israel because they needed to. So Netanyahu will talk to Congress. Congress will listen and do what they want to do. But Netanyahu will try to fight against it. Only option they have, like you said before, nuclear weapon, which which Muslim world don't have it yet around. But they have in Iran a reactor which can be used exactly to produce it, which exactly exists in this moment.
Wow. I mean, I know that Russia did fund anti-Israel operations What is your view of the geopolitical movements today?
They need to defeat Israel, or it's going to fall, and it's going to be big war. Because plans of Russia and plans of U.S. now it's not connected. Before United States would support Israel, Russia was against it. Now America not supported Israel. It means it's going to fall and it's going to be fight, and the fight will be big.
I agree with that statement. Even if you hate Israel, which I don't, you can't just cut them loose. They got 800 nuclear weapons. World War III will start. I mean, you can't get rid of Israel. And I guess biblically, it's what causes the end of the world, I guess.
Technically, realistically, yes, it is. If Muhammad's church in Palestine will be fall, and they're going to build Israel church, and it's exactly will beginning by Bible World War III. And it's exactly what they tried to do. They tried to use nuclear weapon for it.
Stephen, Virginia, thank you for holding. You're on the air.
Yes, thank you. We're longtime Prison Planet subscribers. We really love the show. I wanted to say something about Netanyahu. You know, it's a sad day in America when these useless people in Congress stand up and applaud someone who, in, I think, 2002, I have a quote, as far as I know this is accurate, Netanyahu said, "America can dry up and blow away with the wind when we have finished with it." Now, that's not, to me, the quote from a friend.
All I'm saying is, brother, is that if Israel dried up and blew away tomorrow, all this stuff would continue on. It's evil in the human soul that is causing us our problems, and that's what I'm getting at. But there's a lot of legitimate criticisms of Israel. Let me give you one. Israel has race laws where if you're a worker, contract skilled worker in the country, German, Vietnamese, doesn't matter, you are arrested and deported if you have sex with a Jew. Now, that's a fact. Now, the very same political correct groups support that in Israel, but then tell everybody, you know, here, a socialist agenda, and men are bad, men shouldn't wear pants, and women should be the boss of everything. So my problem is Israel's got some arcane things that go on there that I don't agree with. And it isn't because I'm against Israel in general. It's just that that's going on. So, see, and you can look up what I just said. You can look up. I just don't ever really hear any real criticism by the real anti-Semites out there. They make stuff up. I mean, you know, Photoshop, you name it. It just is a bucket of baloney. Thank you, Steve. D in Boston. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. You're on the air on BB Speech. Go ahead.
You know, I do think there's a lot of nuance and everything is like multifaceted, as you were saying before. Not, you know, it's not black and white. However, with Netanyahu being involved in, you know, the project for the New American Century, I think it's called, with Jared Bush and everyone else, you know, orchestrating 9/11.
Absolutely. If you look at the PNAC documents and you look at who's involved, it's a bunch of Israeli operatives, and clearly they were involved with Saudi Arabia and up to their eyeballs in 9/11. We talked about it earlier. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that it's, you know, Jews who are behind everything or that Israel's behind everything.
But there is a Jewish mafia involved in a lot of the criminal operations.
Exactly. And if you want to get like a little bit metaphysical with it in terms of, you know, biblical and stuff like that, to that component, whether or not, you know, for the reason that they don't see Jesus as the Messiah, will they, you know, openly embrace the Antichrist? I think that's something to explore because of the funding of the
Yeah, because the Bible actually says a false leader will come and he'll be in Jerusalem being worshipped. So now if he shows up, people will say that we've got to worship Israel, so it must be Jesus, and that'll be the great deception. I know, it's very complex and very scary.
You know, I think that, you know, not only with the whole thing being driven between the West and Islam, I think it's that Israel kind of almost wants to emerge from the nuclear holocaust and actually kind of get it started with their beef with Russia and kind of using America, not just Israel using America, but others in that global globalist party are kind of bringing things to a head in order.
That's right. They're in all the nations playing us off against ourselves. It's a conspiracy of the devil against humanity, and that's what I'm trying to get at. It's evil in the minds and hearts of men and women, and it's good in the minds and hearts. That's the real manifesting battle. We're the pawns on the chessboard.